Have you ever thought about what it would be like to just pack up and leave everything you know behind for a chance at a totally new life in a brand new country? Well, in the late 1800s, that's exactly what millions of people did when they came to America, all chasing this huge idea called the American dream. So let's dive in and see what that journey was really like.
So, let me start by asking you this. What would you be willing to risk for a better life? I mean, really think about it. It's a massive, life-changing question, right? Well, between 1860 and 1900, a staggering 14 million people answered that question by packing their bags and coming to America. They left their homes, their families, pretty much everything they ever knew, all for that search, that hope for a better life. Okay, so who were these millions of people? Where were they coming from? And what on earth could make them leave everything behind? Historians kind of break it down into two big waves of immigration around this time. Before the 1880s, you had what they call old immigrants, mostly coming from places in Northern and Western Europe. But after 1880, things changed. A whole new wave, the new immigrants, started arriving from Southern and Eastern Europe, and they completely changed the face of America. And wow, this chart really shows you just how dramatic that shift was. Back in the mid-1800s, almost everyone was coming from places like Germany and Ireland. But fast forward to the late 1800s, and that picture totally flips. Now over 80% are coming from Southern and Eastern Europe. That is a huge, huge change, and it absolutely transformed America's cities. So why? Why would so many people make this incredibly difficult and honestly pretty scary journey? It's because America was seen as the land of opportunity. It was this place where, supposedly, anyone could succeed if they just worked hard enough. There were all these pull factors, right? Things that were pulling people toward America. You had the promise of jobs in these new booming factories. You had the chance to escape poverty or religious persecution. And for a lot of people, there was this amazing dream of actually owning your own land, something that was just completely impossible back home. There was this popular saying that really captured all that hope, that in America, the streets were paved with gold. Now, obviously, people didn't think the streets were literally made of gold, but it shows you the incredible, almost unbelievable level of hope people had. They were imagining a place of endless possibility. But here's the tough part. Did the reality actually live up to the dream? For so many people, the answer was a very quick and a very difficult no. That golden opportunity they were dreaming of? Well, it was met with a harsh and pretty unforgiving new world. And to really get a sense of the challenges, you've just got to look at how fast the cities were growing. It was explosive. Take Chicago, for example. In 1850, it was a town of about 30,000 people. By 1900, it was a massive city of nearly 1.7 million. The cities just weren't built to handle that many people that fast. So this created a huge gap, right, between the dream and reality. Instead of that safe job and a nice home people dreamed of, many immigrants found themselves working dangerous, low-paying factory jobs and living in these crowded, often dirty apartment buildings called tenements. I mean, life in these cities could be just plain dangerous. Trash would pile up in the streets, tenements were often dark, super cramped, and totally unsafe. Fire was a constant threat. And all those factories nearby, they were pumping pollution into the air and the water. So just how bad did it get? Well, in Chicago during the 1870s, diseases spread so fast in these conditions that half of all babies died before they even reached their 5th birthday. 50%. That's the shocking reality that was hiding underneath that dream of golden streets. But you know what? Faced with all these incredible hardships, immigrants didn't just give up, not even close. They relied on their absolute greatest strength, each other. They stuck together and they built these amazing communities, not just to survive, but to hold on to who they were in this new world. So how'd they do it? Well, they formed neighborhoods with people from their home countries. They created a little Italy or a Greek town where they could speak their own language and help each other figure things out. They opened their own businesses, and they started these things called aid societies. Basically, they were clubs that would help families with rent or doctor's bills when things got really tough. And help also came from these really amazing places called settlement houses. Think of them like neighborhood centers right in the middle of poor areas that were there to support immigrant families. The most famous one was probably Hull House in Chicago. It gave people English classes, it had daycare for the kids, all sorts of essential services that helped thousands of people adjust to their new lives. But poor living conditions weren't the only challenge these immigrants faced. They also ran into some pretty serious opposition from people who were already living in America. And this brought up a really tough question. Was the door to America really open to everyone?
See, some of the people who were born in America, who historians call nativists, they started to get scared of all the newcomers. They were afraid that with millions of new people willing to work for really low pay, they would end up losing their own jobs. And that fear about money often boiled over into prejudice against people whose cultures and religions seemed different.
And eventually, these fears actually got turned into laws. A huge example of this is the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. This law banned pretty much all Chinese people from immigrating to the United States. And this was a massive deal. It was the very first time in history that the US government had ever blocked an entire group of people based on where they came from. For some, that open door was definitely starting to close. So when you look at the whole picture, the incredible hope people started with, the crushing reality they often found, the amazing strength they showed by building communities, and the walls of prejudice they ran up against, it leaves us with this really big, important question. For the millions who came here, was the American dream a finish line they could finally cross, or was it more like a race that never truly ended? That's definitely something to think about.